States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please. Can't read that.
Supervisor Gantz? Uh-oh.
Got it? Oh. Yeah.
Anyone? What do we need? You need it? Oh no. This is not good. Okay, well, we could move on. I have some batteries. Okay, I can mark them. I'll mark you.
Okay. All present. Thank you. Next, Supervisor Winky just showed up. Mark him in. Okay. All right. We're going to have citizens' comments, and I just want to make a little preemptive speech on that. Any citizens here wishing to speak, everyone who wishes to speak will have one opportunity to speak for 3 minutes. Commentators must provide their name and address for the record before making their comments. Be asked to refrain from using vulgar or profane language, to avoid attacks, threats, or comments directed at individuals. You're also advised that under open meeting law, according to the Corporation Council, the board cannot respond directly to any comments made. Ask not to request that we do so. Failure to follow these guidelines or engaging in any kind of behavior which is disorderly or abusive or disruptive may result in being asked to leave the premises. Are there any citizens here to speak? Step up to the podium, sir. State your name and address.
Thanks. Good evening, friends and neighbors. My name is Sam Ruchnick. I live at 6412 62nd Avenue, Kenosha, Wisconsin, 53142. My son attends K-Tech West. I teach math at Indian Trail High School and Academy. I want to start off by thanking you for making yourselves available to the public this evening. Thanking you for your service to our city. As y'all vote on the budget this evening, I'm disappointed at the seemingly minimal efforts to address the civil unrest in our city. You have not proposed shifting Kenosha's tax dollars away from police and towards other underfunded social services. You have not even required the police to take unarmed combat and de-escalation training classes. You have instead proposed to increase instead of trim our already bloated police budget. Many Kenoshans and Americans want to see systemic racism addressed, and with more than just adding body cams to the long list of police expenses. After the attack on Jacob Blake, there was a spotlight on Kenosha to take action and lead the charge in criminal justice reform. The country is watching us now. Many Kenoshans want to address systemic racism, but many Kenoshans, and perhaps even some in this room, don't believe that systemic racism exists. In Kenosha and America in 2020, we are living in a world where many of us do not agree on the same frameworks of facts. I'm disappointed in a lot of this budget proposal, but in a world where we don't even agree on the same facts, I want to say that I'm grateful that my representatives are at least willing to set up a commission to better understand the issues. I pray that my representatives are being serious in this venture, that you're approaching it with honest intention, and committing to following through on the proposal to start up a commission on racial equity, so that perhaps in the coming weeks and months we can have a conversation with more agreed upon facts than the one we're having now. Thank you. God bless.
Any other citizens' comments? Any other citizens? Hearing none, citizens' comments are closed. Thank you. I have no announcements, so we're going to move into the presentation of the Kenosha County 2021 budget. Supervisor Rose.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In on each desk, you will see 2021 Kenosha County budget a summary, and this gives you all of the detail within that budget. I want to just hit some of the highlights, and this information here you can also read and study before debate tomorrow night, and it may be something that you can pass on to your constituents, some of whom aren't going to know all of this kind of detail that we have here. First of all, the Finance Committee held hearings over 4 nights. There were 2 changes made to the budget. One was an increase in the district attorney's budget of some $28,000. That $28,000 had to do with making the district attorney's office more secure. It was suggested by the district attorney. It seemed appropriate to the committee and was included in the budget. It had also been recommended by the Judiciary and Law Enforcement Committee. The second change in the budget was the committee deleted some $750,000 from bonding, and that would have gone for the purpose of studying, obtaining blueprints, architectural design of a building to replace the job center, and take a look at the long-term needs of the various offices that meet within the building we are now located in, and relocating this building and its offices to a site in the uptown area, possibly on 63rd Street, but certainly not limited to that site alone, but in the general central city, which we call the uptown area. That was deleted from the budget. So what you have before you in summary is a general purpose levy of over $70,636,119. This is slightly over 3% from the 2020 budget, and it meets the state levy limit requirements. I will suggest tomorrow night that we can reduce it, that levy increase below 3%, in particular 2.98%, by raising what we call the vacancy adjustment section of the budget. Now that vacancy adjustment is now $665,500. By raising that to $700,000, you reduce very easily the levy increase under 2%. That vacancy adjustment has been higher over the years. Last year it was about the same, the 665. In that, but in the past we've had it at $1 million. I believe the highest was around $1.2 million, $1.3 million. So that is something that can be adjusted, which impacts directly the property tax, the levy increase. For the past 13 years, the general purpose levy has averaged 2.3%. That includes budgets which are 3%, 2.5%, and we've had them as low as 0% and no increase in 2013. What does this equal on a $100,000 home? $437.90, or a 90-cent increase over the prior year. Equalized value is increased to $995 million. That's some 6.5%, slightly less than last year, which was in excess of 7%, but this is still a very substantial equalized growth rate. For the last 7 years, the equalized value increase has been a little over 5%. So we're ahead of the average over the last 7 years. Our mill rate is 7 consecutive years of a decrease of the tax rate. The tax rate for 2021 is in line with what it was 10 years ago. Now, where in the budget are you going to see increases? There is expenditure increases of $3,750,000. They're attributable to such things as your standard wages increases that we voted on in the past, countywide personnel increases. The Sheriff's Department is hiring 6 new deputy sheriffs. There will be these sheriffs will be around the Civic Center to provide additional security. Human Services Department placement increases. These are juvenile and adult placements. Are increasing some $1 million. This past year, this year, 2020, there's going to be $1 million deficit in that fund. There's Brookside levy offset, some $400,000 in 2020. 2021, it's going to be $3,000 from Brookside into the general fund. We're anticipating a sales tax increase this year, and as we are in 2021. The treasurer's tax delinquency related revenue decreases. In other words, even though we're in a slowdown, people are still paying their taxes. And the debt service is going to increase some $400,000 over 2021. So your principal and interest being paid on debt in 2021 overall is some $17,400,000. We mentioned in the statement here that we've listed as a little over 5.5% full-time equivalent increases in budgeted positions. This is due to the hiring of 6 new deputy sheriffs, as I've mentioned, to provide additional security around the courthouse. Now, what are the material expenditure changes in the budget? Personnel expense increases, children and family service and aging disability services program growth. You heard a comment by a citizen here on that issue. In fact, there is a program growth and court-ordered placement and institute increases, all spelling out additional costs for children and family services, aging and disability services. Sheriff's Department will not have ICE inmates this coming year, as that was true for part of this year as well. That reduces revenues. It also reduces overtime and some of the contracts connected with having ICE inmates. There are capital expenditure increases related to economic development, such as Highway S and law enforcement, including body cameras and the debt service increase of $400,000 I mentioned before. Material revenue changes are such things as children and family services program revenue increases. In other words, more money coming in for programs from more children and family services. Workforce Development Division revenue increase, debt service increase, sales tax increase to the county, Health Division program increases, aging and disability program revenue increases, Willowbrook and Brookside private pay revenue and billing increases, slight increases in private pay costs, and more private pay people. Sheriff's Federal Inmate Housing revenue decrease, obviously, because we don't have the ICE people there. Highway Federal State revenue increases towards roads and other infrastructure for economic development. This budget includes county capital improvements of over $27 million bonding for expenditures totaling over $31 million. There is $10 million for Highway S, which we anticipate will be a substantial jump starter for economic development from Highway S. There's over $3.8 million in Public Works Highway Division capital expenditures for transportation, infrastructure, paving of approximately 15 miles of county roads. A number of years ago, the board set a standard of 15 miles of paving for county roads. We've usually tried to hit that number. Sometimes it's been 13 miles, and I believe during the former recession it dipped below 10 miles. But this year we're hitting it at 15 miles, and because we want to keep our roads good in the county. There's over $1.2 million in Public Works Highway Division expenditures for vehicles and equipment for the County Highway Department. In the area of Public Works, there's a substantial sum going for the County Veterans Memorial Park enhancements, half of which will be funded by grants and donations, and the remaining $800,000 for park infrastructure improvements. We're spending some $2 million in information technology capital expenditures today. That seems to be an annual expenditure for various types of information technology, capital replacement of various things, or bringing on new technology. That's probably something that you will see in the budget year after year after year, ad infinitum. In the Sheriff's Department, there for capital expenditures over $2 million for 13 vehicles at $800,000, or an average cost of some $61,500 for each vehicle. $605,000 for the Kenosha County Detention Center software related to door intercom lighting systems, and also $425,000 for body and vehicle camera program implementation. It's my understanding, as reported to Finance Director, that we're using the same vendor as the city. We, however, are buying more equipment, and I've heard the comment, well, isn't the city spending less than the county? And that's probably true, but they are not buying as much equipment. We are going to outfit each deputy sheriff as well as each correctional guard. There is $398,000 of Public Works Golf Division capital expenditures funded exclusively by golf fund revenues, and which go into their reserves. So there's nothing coming out of either operations or the bonding for Golf Division Public Works expenditures. The budget resolution is an important document that you'll want to take a look at. It's the first document. It's one of the documents that was distributed to you. It contains a lot of important policies, work rule changes that you want to look at carefully. This is our message to our workforce as well as the general public as to what we intend to do in public policy for the coming year. For example, we have a policy on county drug-free workplace. We authorize certain sale of real estate next to the Kenosha County Veterans Memorial Park, which was unneeded, and that money to be placed in a park development fund. With respect to the courtroom and the courthouse that has been studied and anticipated to be renovated to restore the way it was years ago, we're expecting not to do that unless we receive $1,750,000 in donations. So you'll see there that project funded for $3.5 million in the budget. However, That will not be spent. They will not be bonded unless we raise privately $1,750,000. There's the authorization for the creation of a racial equity commission to develop mission composition and general goals of the commission, looking at county policies and procedures and how to contribute to positively to eradicate racism. It's an important statement. It was mentioned by one of the citizen comments this evening. So these are some of the goals that are set forth in the budget resolution. There's a lot more in that budget resolution, which is repetitive of years before, which we didn't change. You're certainly free to look at that and make any other kind of additions or corrections or changes that you want. Our goal as a finance committee has always been to maintain our bond rating, which is AA plus, and to keep us on track towards a AAA rating. I mean, we've mentioned that many times before, that that's our ultimate goal is to achieve that AAA rating, and we're hopeful that this budget will contribute to that effort. The budget presented this evening is one that was adopted, amended, and voted upon by the Finance Committee, and by a vote of 7-0. We urge your approval tomorrow night after its discussion. Thank you.
Supervisor again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to help out Supervisor Rose with the two changes up front. The one with that he mentioned about the district attorney, that was actually for a program that was half funded for this upcoming year. And then the funding was going to run out, and that was for actual termination of parental rights for children who are going to be moved into a foster home. So that just, if anybody wasn't here, I just want to clarify what that was for. I also want to clarify, we did have a citizen comment about the sheriff's department being a little bloated. I just wanted to say that, in case supervisors weren't at the meeting or listening in or watching, we're actually replacing the folks that were guarding the courthouse and that before, that we had a contract with. So that's the reason that we're adding those deputies and a sergeant, which is going to handle the cloud or the whatever we're taking pictures of with the body cams. I'm not technologically advanced enough to know what that is, but that is what that is for. And the vehicles, and they are trucks, much to my chagrin, but I will bite my tongue. That we have we rotate every 3 years the purchase of those sheriff vehicles. So and I think judiciary and law should look at a plan, see what that plan is, and have that as an informational thing for their meeting. But that's a little update on the sheriff's department and what actual adjustments we're making with them. Also like to thank the veterans that have come out tonight for their service in the past. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn right now, to move into organizational after that. Supervisor Rodriguez. All those in favor? Carried, thank you. Move right into the organizational meeting now. We'll do a roll call to make it official. Take a second. Sorry. Okay. And
Supervisor Winky?
Yes. I pushed that a couple of times. Keep doing it.
Yes.
Okay.
looks like we're all lit up. Thank you. Again, I'm going to ask for citizens' comments. Anybody have any comments from the public? Step to the podium, sir. State your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman
Yes.
and County Board Supervisors, special guests, and all our veterans here today. My name is Ali Nelson, and I reside at 7225 150th Avenue in Kenosha, Wisconsin, as a citizen. But most importantly, as Kenosha County Division Director of Veteran Services. I'm here tonight in support of the 2021 budget for Kenosha County Veterans Memorial Park, phase one of that park. Kenosha County is rich in military heritage. The first commissioned officer, Augustus Quarles, was killed in action in the Battle of Churubusco, Mexico, during the Mexican-American War of 1846 to 1848. Kenosha County Veterans Memorial Park will be a park to pay tribute to military veterans like Augustus Quarles and others who serve and those who are still serving the United States America Armed Forces. It will be a place of healing for many veterans with opportunity for retreat, education, and for those to reconnect and reflect on their military service. As we embarked on Veterans Day, which is only 7 days away, this would be a nice show of appreciation for our veterans' service, for the board to vote in favor of phase one of this park. I thank you in advance for your consideration and your time. God bless you, our veterans, and these United States of America.
Thank you, sir. Any other citizens' comments?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rob Roberts. I reside at 1505 84th Street, Kenosha, Wisconsin. I am a citizen here of Wisconsin. I'm also a veteran of 20 plus years in the United States Navy. In the past, you've heard me talk, or some of you have heard me talk about the Veterans Memorial Park and why it's important to me personally. I am a forgotten veteran. I'm a Desert Storm veteran, and I've been in discussions and heated discussions with politicians that Desert Shield, Desert Storm is the same thing as Iraq and Afghanistan. It's not. By that analogy, it was 10 years apart. By the same analogy, Korea was only 6 years after World War II. Vietnam, Korea was only 5 years after World War II. Vietnam was only 6 years after World War II. Also, the fact that we've got a memorial in Brighton that has all of the conflicts up to World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and then it goes straight into Iraq, Afghanistan, counting 2001. Well, Desert Shield, Desert Storm was in 91. Big purpose of why this memorial is important overall. In Wisconsin, as of 2001, 7.6% of the population over 18 were veterans. 4.7% of the population served in World War II. The veteran population. 37% of the veteran population served in Vietnam. Over 15% served in Desert Shield, Desert Storm. 13% served after September 11th. And another 32,000 served during the Korean War. This memorial will be a credit to all the veterans in this state and this county, and I appreciate your consideration of this.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is George Stover. I reside at 8615 113th Avenue in Pleasant Prairie, Wisconsin. I'm a resident and a veteran of Kenosha County. I want to thank you for your consideration and everything that you've done up to this point in making the Memorial Park a reality. Obviously, we know that it's going to take more to continue to fund the phasing that the concept plan has put forward. One of the things that I, as a veteran, find extremely gratifying is the concept that this park is designed to remember the veterans of Kenosha County, the state of Wisconsin, veterans of this United States. It's an opportunity for citizens as well as students to learn about the rich heritage that this country, this state, and this county has provided in regards to the military population who has served their country. It's a time for veterans, or it provides a place for veterans to reflect on their time and service. And it's also a place that they can continue their journey toward their own self-healing, as well as the healing for the rest of us that are out there. I know that the cost is not a small matter to take forward, but one of the things that we need to realize that we as veterans take close to our heart is that each of us came away from our time and service with our own personal baggage. That one of the things that we strive for, especially within the Veterans of Foreign War here in the States, is we recognize that on an average, there are 22 veterans a day who commit suicide across the United States. And in my opinion, if this park, no matter what the cost, is able to help one veteran get past his demons, the cost is well worth it. I thank you for your consideration, and I look forward for the future of this park. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Here.
Good evening. My name is, excuse me, Dale Kirkman. I reside at 331 264th Avenue, Kansasville, which is in Racine County, but I live in the big metropolis of Brighton, 1,400 residents. Anyhow, living close to the Union Grove Veterans Home, which is only 5 miles from us, I'm also the Veterans of Foreign War state representative to the Union Grove Veterans Home. One of the things we have done in the past is taken them on a lot of outings to various places for the enjoyment of the veterans up there. Namely restaurants, we went to a Racine Raiders football game, Holy Hill, things like that in the area. And I foresee that this is going to be one of the top outings where veterans of the Union Grove Veterans Home will like to go there and visit there. It's going to be extremely important for them to see what's going on there. The majority of the guys up there, and there's some ladies up there, are ambulatory. There's quite a few that can get out and ride the buses to the different activities, which my wife and I help when they go out on these different outings. So I know this would be very valuable for the veterans that are residing there and give them a chance to get out, although they've been cooped up here now since March. I feel really sorry for those guys up there. So I appreciate your consideration and going forward with this here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Any other citizens' comments?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bill Erickson. I served 3 years in the Marine Corps, and I'm asking for your support and thank you for the funding for the Kenosha County Veterans Memorial Park. In short, this will provide an opportunity for veterans, their families, and everyone else to honor by the use of the park every day, to honor veterans every day of the year rather than just on the two main holidays of Veterans Day and Memorial Day. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other citizens' comments? Seeing none, any committee chair reports? Seeing none, we'll move into old business.
Old business, ordinance, second reading, 2 required.
Your mic.
Is it on? From the Judiciary and Law Committee, an ordinance regarding repeal and recreation of the Municipal Code of Kenosha County, Chapter 3.6451, Retention of Records, Joint Services Board. Supervisor Boyd Frederick, I. Celebrity, I. Belsky, I. Gully, I. Nordigan, I. Palmaville, I. Wamble, I.
Supervisor Frederick.
Move ordinance 19.
A motion by Supervisor Frederick, second by Supervisor Shelby. Supervisor Frederick.
Yes, I have one quick motion to make is halfway down the page, it says Kenosha City County Joint Services. They can make a motion to just have it say Kenosha Joint Services and cross out City County.
I'll second that as a friendly amendment.
With this resolution being joint services and also by Supervisor Jeff Gantz, I'd like to have Supervisor Gantz speak on this ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Supervisor Frederick. What this is this became outdated, so we had to go and work with the city and the state to put together a records retention for just internal joint services things like time cards, dispatch logs, etc. Incident records within the telecommunication center. So it's really an internal thing. I was called out on an email by Kenosha I about not being transparent with this resolution, but it's just basically house cleaning. We had to do it. It was overseen by a state board as well as worked with the county on. And one of the things that was mentioned in the email to me was the incident records, and we actually went 3 years over what we held them for before. So it's really an internal thing for joint services records retention. It doesn't pertain to the police and sheriff's reports. They do their own things and keep those. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. We also have Matt from the Corp Counsel's office and Josh from Joint Services here if anybody has any technical questions that might fly slightly over my head.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Grady first.
Just a question, Jeff. In retention of these records, are these paper records you're talking about, or are these some type of computerized digital records you're talking about?
I think there's a breakdown for all different kinds that have to be held for different times, and that's what this schedule is for. But I'll let Josh or Matt answer that.
Sorry, we didn't quite hear the question. If that could just be repeated.
The question is, are these records digital, that is virtual type situations, or are they actual paper?
It's actually, depending on which record series you're talking about, it's actually typically both. There's some combination of digital records and some combination of paper records.
Very well, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to urge the board to reject the proposition here that's been advocated by the Judiciary and Law Enforcement Committee. There are too many situations today where records become very, very important. We read in the paper nationally how cases developed 10, 20 years ago, such and such happened. And if you start destroying records, where is our history of whatever that event may be? These can all be placed on digital format. The paper ones, I don't know what the division is between current paper and digital. I suspect that if we reject the ordinance, they'll all be on digital. But I think we're making a grave mistake from the point of view of the general public who might have some sort of use for it that we have no knowledge of today. And I think we're doing ourselves as a government a disfavor by destroying our own history when we don't know in the future if we need to search the records 10, 20 years ago. In my own office, we have records that go back to 1940 cases. We could throw them all out, but from time to time, it's important for somebody who may have been represented by my father or someone else in the office to search out what that information is all about. Well, if it's good enough for a law office, it's certainly even more important, I think, for government in this county and this community to retain all of its records so we know and the public knows what happened years ago. Let's not be so fastidious here that we must purge ourselves of our history. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to echo Supervisor Rose's concerns. Some time ago, this board made a commitment to transparency and being accountable. And we did that by lowering the cost of public records fees associated with those requests. If you go through this ordinance change, there are 13 instances where we are lowering, many of which quite substantially, how long we keep these records. Just to briefly go through them, one, we keep permanently the annual budget. We're going to get rid of that after 10 years. I think it's important to know what we spent our money on and how much we spent as a taxing body. Attendance records are going down from 10 years to 7 years. I won't go through each. I think these documents are available. I'll just go through what we're lowering here. We're going to keep this one 7 years versus permanently, 3 years versus 7 years, 7 years versus permanently. We're not going to keep this record at all versus 30 years. This one's going down 4. This one's going down 4 years. This one's going from permanently kept to 1 year. Another one from permanently kept to 7 years. It goes on. And anyways, I don't think this is what we should be doing as a form of government. And I think it's counterproductive to the commitment we've made to work for our constituents and do that and as transparent as a matter as possible. Through the chair to Mr. Nielsen, I did ask how many records would be permanently destroyed if this passes, to which you didn't give me an answer. So I guess I'll ask you again tonight, how many records, if this were to pass tonight, would be permanently destroyed?
So I don't have an answer for you. I guess my question I would need clarification, and that was what I was asking for in the email you're referring to. Which record are you asking about how many records there would be?
I think my question is pretty black and white. should this ordinance change pass, how many records by and large will be permanently destroyed?
So the records here, there's 39 record series. Within each record series, I mean, I would be guessing at each one. I don't, and I believe that's why I asked for clarification on your question. I will give you an example under item 1, accounts payable and supporting documents. We have a retention schedule. The old retention schedule was 7-year retention. We're asking for that to go to fiscal year +4. Oh, I'm sorry. So that would be an increase in our retention schedule there. So in that case, we would be maintaining records longer than what was under the old ordinance. But I don't have a specific number to say how many would be destroyed.
And to clarify, the email that Mr. Nielsen received dealt with incident reports, which was referring to law enforcement records. The concern was police reports and other kind of matters.
If I may, the email I sent touched on incident reports, but that's not what my question was. I can read my question, and anybody here as well, I'll forward the email. How many records will be permanently destroyed if this passes? I'm guessing many thousands. Please give me your best guess. I didn't narrow it down. I was just asking for records as a whole.
The email I had that was received on October 23rd was, in the meantime, as for incident reports being changed to 10 years, I have some questions. And then there are questions that are listed. So we can try to answer the question more specifically about other records. Josh was trying to respond to what he thought was the, and to be honest, I thought too, was the issue at hand, which was incident reports, which this retention schedule does not touch. So.
Okay. I think this would be a bad turn for the county board to take when, in changing our records retention schedule, we'd be permanently deleting God knows how many records. Our staff doesn't know how many records that would be. And is that something we really want to tell our constituents? Is we're getting rid of government records. We can't tell you how many. We can't tell you which ones, but we're getting rid of them. And I also want to highlight here, if there was I had a question. It says, what is the reason for this? If cost, what will be the savings? And in here, Mr. Nielsen, you state there's no cost savings at this point. So we're doing this, we're not saving any money, and we're destroying who knows how many records. I urge my colleagues to vote this down tonight.
Supervisor against.
Thank you. The county has a record retention schedule. And I bet you might want to know what those records are before you'd want to know internal memos of joint services. So this is not a big conspiracy theory with Big Brother looking down on you. Whether you pass this or you don't pass this tonight, we're still going to have a retention schedule. I mean, we worked with the city and with a state board to get these numbers the way they should be per what's out in the marketplace. I mean, this is not an throwing away records that I would like to know how many county board supervisors have their budgets from 2 years ago. Anybody? All right. Well, all right. You save your budgets. Okay, you got me. Let me use another example. But these are not records that that our constituents are going to want to see. Their time cards or stuff like that. I mean, it's not, to me, we have to have a records retention schedule. Look at our evidence locker room once. We've got piles and piles of evidence we got to save. How long you want people to keep these records? Even the IRS doesn't ask you to keep records that long. So, I'd like them to respond to how long this has been in the works, what state board oversaw this, and what the background is for this. Thank you.
So in 2005, joint services, the last retention schedule was put in place in 2005. Everything that's in this updated version replaces what was there previously. the retention schedules have a sunset to them per state, I believe, and I'll let Matt talk about that, but I think that's per state law. There's a sunset on those. So every so many years, those have to be updated and replaced. That's really what was driving this. If we don't get rid of anything, we're going to have to, there will be a cost to that eventually, because you will need additional storage space for physical records and additional electronic storage space as well. Everything we put in place is looked at in comparison to what the state requirements are. In some cases, it's laws that require this. In other cases, there's state general retention schedules that we're trying to coordinate with to make sure that we're doing things the same as everybody else, basically.
And just to build on what Josh said, the original joint service retention schedule is from 2005. That expires after 10 years. Retention schedules have to be submitted to the Public Records Board. They make a determination in terms of appropriate time for how long records need to be held. Kenosha County as a whole has a record schedule as well that's done through the Public Record Board. Our current one is the Wisconsin General Records Schedule. You can find that on the Public Record Board website. It's also an addendum in our own ordinance. That record schedule touches on all sorts of records that the county holds. Because Joint Services is a quasi-governmental agency, it's a combination of city and county. It needs its own retention schedule. It just can't piggyback on the counties. And so that's why Joint Services has to go and make their own, otherwise they won't have one. This particular record schedule was submitted, I believe, in 2018, 2019. We were waiting a little while because the Wisconsin, the Public Record Board was actually making another record schedule specifically for municipalities as a whole. We were seeing if we could kind of streamline that process. Unfortunately, that didn't work. So we submitted the public record schedule that you have before you to the PRB, Public Record Board. They reviewed that in their first quarter, which I think was of this year. They gave us approval in June. So as of June, this record schedule would be good for 10 years. However, it has to be incorporated as an ordinance. Otherwise, they can't, Joint Services cannot use it. So the record schedule that you have before you revamped a lot of the records that were in the original Joint Services retention schedule. There's some records that just didn't really apply. Additionally, because Joint Services, due to an intergovernmental agreement in 2010, wasn't handling certain records like law enforcement records, like police reports. This record schedule kind of condenses some of these old outdated forms into a more concise and accurate reflection of current records. That retention schedule, so we have this new retention schedule, which would be in effect for 10 years starting in June of 2020, and that would have to be renewed in 2030.
And then just one other thing to add. So Joint Services, as Matt said, has to work with the city as well. So the city is in the part of the delay was the city is in the process of putting their retention schedules together as well. So we were having to make sure that anything that Joint Services didn't result in records didn't result in a record schedule that was less than what the city was going to put in place. So we had to make sure that we were not only were we matching the county side, we're matching the city as well. So the retention schedule that you have in front of you in the ordinance matches or exceeds the county's general schedules and the municipalities' general schedules from the state of Wisconsin through the Public Records Board. So we're not doing anything less than what either the city or county government's doing.
And there is some reduction from our previous ordinance, but those reductions are still equaling some other schedule. And I think in almost 99% of the circumstances, except for one, where there just is no corresponding schedule.
I have some vague questions, and I'm on an education, being a new supervisor. Joint Services, when there is a 911 call, and that might be called the incidents, and the records of that communication, and then the records after it's gone to the court system, so that defense attorneys, prosecutors, whoever else is involved with that. Does joint services have a limit in retaining all that information?
So there's a couple. If we're talking about the incident records for law enforcement or for fire calls for service, those are the custodians of those records are those agencies. It's the police department or the sheriff's department. So this joint services retention schedule doesn't impact a police department incident report or a sheriff's department incident report. So all of those things remain. We have electronic records on call for service reports going back in the electronic database to the early 90s, I believe even into some of it into the 1980s. If we're talking about evidence type records, there's no evidence records that are in this retention schedule. All of that is governed by, typically by statute, depending on what type of crime we're talking about. For instance, homicide type crimes, that type of evidentiary records and those things, those are going to stay there for as long as they need to under the law for homicide. So we're not talking about police department or sheriff's department reports here. We're talking about, for the most part, it's administrative type records. But in the specific case of incidents, so we have 911 recordings. 911 recordings are kept for 120 days. So there's some differences depending on what specifically we're talking about. But we're not talking about a police report or a sheriff's department report.
Okay, so the incident report, the 911 call, we'll put it there, is saved 120 days. Are you able to answer me if the sheriff's department or the city police are retaining those records when joint services would not continue to keep them?
So it depending on the type of incident that it is, there are times where the 911 calls themselves, the recording of that is becomes part of the case, and it becomes part of the evidence, that it would be maintained in evidence along with that case, just like any other evidence. If it's a 911 call that it could be something as simple as a minor accident or something like that, then those would not be, that recording itself would not be retained past that amount of time.
Okay.
But the incident record, so the incident, all of the data that goes along with that for which units were dispatched, what the times were, all of the computer-aided dispatch notes, everything the officer told the dispatcher, all of that data, all of that information, that is not in this retention schedule. That is part of the incident record under the sheriff's department or under the police department.
Okay, one more clarification. The reason I'm asking is that every board supervisor comes here to this table with their own personal experiences, and mine is in real estate and property rights. And our county has kept records since it was created, and that affects a lot of people. I am very concerned when I say let's get rid of documents and worry about the storage cost, that maybe us blanketly giving you permission to get rid of documents may not be the good thing to do. So that was my comment. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to touch on three instances here in this schedule here. Supervisor Gens mentioned that, a lot of this is clerical, or, however you wanted to word it, of no importance is what I got from it. Three big ones I just want to draw from this that we are lowering, our board agenda and minutes. We keep those forever currently. We lower that down to 7 years. I think it's important that residents know what is going on at the Joint Services Board. They can look back at many years and see what initiatives were taken and passed or not passed. Employee bloodborne pathogen records. This record series includes documents pertaining to an employee's unsafe exposure to bloodborne pathogens. We're just going to get rid of them. We're not going to keep them anymore. That to me, I'm not insinuating anything, but what does somebody from the public look at that and think, why are we not keeping these records? Are we trying to hide something? Are we putting a guise on something? And then the general ledger, we keep that right now. Now we keep it for the fiscal year plus 7 more. This record series pertains to documentation of financial activity of joint services such as the general ledger, daily journal entries, income statements, ledger sheets, trust account ledgers. So, I mean, bloodborne pathogens, financial documents, agendas and minutes. These are important records. I don't think we should be rushing to to tamper this down and get rid of some of these sooner, or in the one case, just get rid of them right off the bat. Thank you.
Supervisor Franco.
Yes, thanks. If we're not saving any money, what's the harm of keeping these records indefinitely?
At some point, there's going to be a cost to it because we're already out of physical space. So we're going to have to start to, that was under the fact that we were already getting rid of records under the old retention schedule. We're going to run out of space for storage because all of this stuff is going in boxes and those boxes have to go somewhere. So or we're trying to digitize things and put them into some kind of a computer program, and then we're talking about electronics storage space, which has a cost to it. So
what sort of a cost are we talking about?
I don't have an answer for you on that.
One other question. Is any of this information even remotely important down the road for legal reasons? I assume Supervisor Rose brought that up. I would imagine he would say yes. I understand the intent, but I'm a little concerned about later on down the road if any of this might be needed for legal purposes.
There are certain records that have legal requirements that they need to be kept X amount of period of time to ensure that if there's any legal action taken. This record schedule on some of these acknowledges those statutes. Again, this was sent to the Public Records Board. The default is generally 7 years, and that's by statute as well. Normally, that's a period of time where most statute limitations run, not all, but that's, I think, the standard. Most of the records that would involve some sort of, I think, controversy are 7 years or longer, generally. It's hard to anticipate exactly what a lawsuit would entail by someone at some point in time, but it does consider statutory time limits for records in terms of legal action.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Mauer.
Thank you. As a business owner, and I know, there's a difference between private business and the county, but a lot of the same employment laws apply. We keep our records longer than a lot of these. It's not a blanket statement. I could see where a lot of these could be purged and it wouldn't affect anything. But for example, employee retirement records. I don't know if anybody's heard of Enron, but since then the government has gotten extremely picky, and they monitor any type of retirement now. We keep I've got records from 30 years ago that I sit on. Employee wage and tax statements and other records. We keep ours longer than this. I agree that some of these could be purged, but I think some of them need to be looked at almost on an individual, line by line basis. Thank you.
Supervisor Decker.
Thank you. So my understanding is that we have a retention record
policy, and this is just updating it or changing it because we need to do that every year, every 10 years. So obviously we need a record retention policy. So, we need something, but we're not happy with the policy, the line items in here and the times in some of these items. Two things that pop out at me is the, audio recordings of meetings, that we only keep them 90 days after the minutes are approved. Why are we deleting audio recordings of meetings? Minutes are completely different than actual audio recordings. You can tell that by our county board meetings. Reading our minutes is completely different than actually listening to a recording of the meeting. I don't understand why we would only keep those 90 days when the county keeps them for years and years and years. The board agenda and minutes, 7 years. I think we should keep them in, longer than that. Those are just, and then the 911 communications, 121 days. I believe we should keep those longer than 121 days. And so I think, the committee should look at these line items one by one and decide what is an appropriate level of retention. So I'd like to make a motion to refer this back to committee. Jerry. I already spoke to the referring it back to committee basically.
I would not be opposed to that. Like Mr. Nielsen stated, there are series in here where we are increasing how long we're keeping them. I think that's a step in the right direction. I'm not suggesting, I don't want my colleagues to think that I'm suggesting we keep everything forever. But I don't think we just go down to the bare minimum because that's what we can do. I think Kenosha County holds itself a little bit higher than that. I think we should pride ourselves on that. So for that reason, I think we should keep, or I think that this board should pass the changes that add additional time to keeping these records, but I don't think we should lower any of these, and for that reason, I'll support the motion to send us back to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll also support the motion on referral back to committee. There's a couple things, if you just take a look at the mood of the supervisors in this room this evening, there's substantial support for referral back to committee, but from my own perspective, when they talked about digitization and going into the virtual realm for record storage, that was supposed to be pie in the sky. That was supposed to be no cost, plenty of storage room, the sky's the limit. Now all of a sudden there's costs associated with that. I don't really buy that. I think there's probably a way to look at these individual items and say, this pile can be disposed of in a certain amount of time, and these other parts are valuable and they need to be preserved, maybe in perpetuity, we don't know. But certainly I think that a review of this is in order, and I support the referral.
I'll go ahead and support the referring it back to committee, but I want it to be brought up in committee that I'm not going to support it in the future if we're not digitizing everything. I'm fine with getting rid of records, but as long as we're digitizing them so that it can be utilized in the future, we're terrible at data in this county. We don't bring in enough data, and we give out data, the data that we've analyzed. We put it out too often to meet what we want, but we need to put data out there regardless of what it is, because there's a lot to be learned from it. So yeah, I'll support this tonight, but not in the future if we're not digitizing everything.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess to ask, bouncing off what Supervisor Winkie had brought up about the 121 days of the 911 call, but if it goes into evidence, then it goes back to the police station or county, whatever. Could there be a time where in 121 days they don't know and these things disappear, and now either the municipalities don't have anything to fall back on? Is that a potential?
Typically, the agencies, the law enforcement agencies, they make those requests right away if they need the recordings, whether it be radio traffic or a phone call. We're not typically running into any issues where they're looking for something from
previously. So if there's any tip, normally if there's any question at all, they're gonna request that it get saved.
But the operative word there was typical, not 100%.
I couldn't say 100%, no.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Deck.
I would just like some clarification, on Supervisor Berg's, comment. So through the chair to Supervisor Berg, when you talk about digitizing the records, are you talking about also making sure that there's access to them to the public, as in, for example, that you can access them on a website or something like that? Is that what you mean?
Correct, so that it's still open recordsable in 20 years from now,
Okay, thank
whatever
you.
that topic may be, because there's still data that can be drawn out of that, 30 years from now.
I just wanted to, so the committee knows what you're specifically speaking of. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't even know if the committee that you're kicking it back to can take a one-line veto and work through this. There's a state board that had this for some time that did it with the norms of the other communities and what the statutes and everything says. That's number one. I don't know that we would even have the ability to pick and choose and just come back to you like that. That's something that our corporation counsel can ask. Also, this is not something that we're trying to pull off. We need to do this. We're supposed to do it every 10 years. Another thing is we don't have enough staff at joint services to sit and digitalize everything and have piles of this, piles of that, move it over here. I mean, this is an efficiency thing. I mean, the things you're asking for, I mean, the incident requests, we're adding 3 years to what we kept them before. So if we don't approve anything, they're going to go away in a shorter period. This is massive micromanagement, and you could certainly kick it back to the board. I don't know what we can do with it, but through the chair to our corporation counsel, I mean, the state board is not going to just let us pick and choose what we want to do at what time frame, and then we also have to work with the city. So I mean, you're creating kind of a mess here, but do what you want. Thanks. Do you want to add to that?
The law requires any retention period under 7 years to be approved by the Public Records Board. We can increase record times and we can make an ordinance for that. We would then still need to be able to, even if you increase it past 7 years though, without PRB approval, we would typically have to still give notice to the Wisconsin Historical Society 60 days before the destruction of any record. But it is possible to increase time. It would just probably be helpful, quite honestly, if we had a better idea which records we'd be increasing and maybe to what the kind of the expectations are.
Supervisor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The comment was made that, this is a convenience thing. I think it'd be really convenient, especially given our last several meetings with the length of citizens' comments. I think it probably would have been pretty convenient for us to get our business done without citizens' comments if we locked the doors and turned the lights off and did our business and went home. But that's not what we're here for. It's not the job we're here to do. It's not about being convenient. It's about being transparent. Like the Corporation Counsel's office stated, we can. There's a minimum we can keep things. There's nothing that there's no state law that says you can't keep these records longer than what we suggest. And I just want to reiterate my concern. My concern isn't that we change any one of these and keep them permanently. What I just don't like is the ones that we keep permanently or we keep for 10 years, we're moving down to 3 years, whatever. I don't like moving down and keeping any record. I support Supervisor Berg's suggestion that we digitize all this and the piggyback suggestion that we make this available to the public on a website or whatever that case is. But again, I too often, not just on this issue, but on many issues, we hear it's faster, it's easier for the county board just to do it this way because we can go home sooner. And that's, quite frankly, that's not why I ran for this seat. I don't think that's why any of us ran. We ran to do a job and to do it well. So thank you.
Supervisor Berg.
Since we're still talking about it, we brought up the systemic racism as a health crisis a few months back. We approved it. You're talking about removing audio recordings from 911 dispatch and radio calls, bond receipts, incident reports, personnel files, personnel recruitment and selection. there's a lot there that can be looked at from many, many different perspectives. And if we start removing stuff and don't have a record of it, we're giving ourselves a black eye. We're talking about having body cameras so that we can protect both the officer and the residents of our community. Well, getting rid of records is the same thing. We're not protecting everybody. By getting rid of stuff, assumptions could be made in the future. But if there's no data to show it, then we can't prove anything. But if we want to have skin in the game in the future, in terms of racism being systemic racism being a health crisis, then we need to keep all the data. And this kind of opens up Pandora's box. What other items what other stuff are we deleting from the records of Kenosha County? Maybe we need to look at that. We need to look at our retention policy as a whole for all of it. Because if we're just scrapping stuff after 10 years, and be it just personnel files, well, what happened? You know, what's in that personnel file from 15 years ago, 20 years ago that might be relevant today? So still supporting to send it to committee.
Who made the second on your motion? Rose, okay, thank you. Is this simple majority? Okay.
Point of order, this is to send it back to committee, correct?
Supervisor Rose, did you vote? Supervisor Gens, did you vote? I'm not sure if oh yes, it does let me. Okay. So it passes? 19 yes, 4 no. It passes to go back to committee. Approval of the October 20th, 2020 County Board meeting minutes by Supervisor Gashke.
Supervisor Gashke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we adopt the October 20th minutes as presented.
Moved and seconded to approve the minutes of October 20th. All those in favor? Aye. Carried. Thank you. We will adjourn Sendai. Yes.
Give me a second. I'm starting up the next meeting.
She worked late last night.
Sendai. Yes, it's taking just a minute. Excuse me. There we go. 3. Okay. Now let's see if I can share my screen again. All right.
Okay. County Board Chair appointment.
Chairman appointing Supervisor Jeffrey Gentz to Joint Services Board. County Executive appointment. And number 9, Sean Smith to serve on the Kenosha County Land Information Council. New business policy resolution, first reading 2 required. 1 from the Finance and Administration Committee, a policy resolution 2021 Kenosha County budget. Claims, number 17, We Energies property damage.
Refer to Corporation Council.
Number 18, John Faber vehicle damage.
Refer to Corporation Council.
Motion to adjourn.
If I may, just quickly, is it possible, for our next meeting, not necessarily tomorrow, does the county have, and this is a question for IT, something where we can project, if we have like some sort of mobile screen and a projector on a card or something, we can project that screen? Because I know myself, and I'm sure pretty much everyone past Supervisor Decker cannot read that ever. So I just think that'd be helpful moving forward. Oh, thank you. Second.